Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Ultra Confusion Thursday Night Hangout. I, of course, am your host, Charlie, and I'm joined once again by the prolific Commodore himself, Zealeus.
Sup? It's good to see you, Charlie. How has life been on the edge?
It's been scary. I've been having to hold on for dear life.
What have you been holding on to with your life?
Hope. Dreams.
Such things of my misspent youth. I know not what you talk of anymore.
Yes.
It's been a cold, hard reality that we live in.
It's terrible. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into the thick of it. Let us go on to a topic that, of course, Zealeus has no idea about, but I'm going to say that we were very prepared about this topic.
I'm always prepared for nothing.
Yes. Okay, so here's the deal. It has, I don't know what's going on, but there's this push for AAA titles to get out the door as fast as possible.
Indeed.
Okay. Yes, we saw the horrendous Assassin's Creed Unity launch, and so you have all of these AAA developers, publishers, coming out and saying, "You sons of bitches, stop recording exploits in our game."
Ah, interesting.
So here's my thing. If I understand that you can't fix every little bitty thing, but I would have an individual who's looking out for these videos that, you know, show off these exploits, and then I would mark them down and make damn sure that exploit goes bye-bye as soon as possible, instead of, "Oh my God, stop showing the weak points in our game. We're never going to fix it. That's why you can't show it."
It's like free beta testing.
I know.
It's like, yeah, it's basically like a Google product where it's in beta for years and years.
And the other thing is,
to use it.
Okay, so here's something. I did this with that game, Hunters of the Dead.
Yes.
I wrote in my opinion, it was not an exploit. It was just a loophole.
The one where you can leave halfway through the battle. And,
yes.
Yeah.
So the developer's like, "Yeah, we're aware that we're going to fix it. Thank you for bringing it to our attention." And of course, I get a bunch of people. So I post that review on Steam, and there's one guy going, "You can't do that. That's illegal. You can't say you can't reveal exploits in your review. It's illegal."
It's illegal?
I'm like, well, okay. So here's the deal, young man or madam or
alien,
whatever you may be,
hermaphrodite.
Because I revealed this, the developer, I guess it's because it's an indie developer and they want to make sure their product is actually polished. I know. Crazy concept. They actually looked at the review, they looked at the weak point, and I was not the only one who brought it up, and then they fixed it. Now, of course, you get penalized for it.
Well, it's also not only in video games. This has been a huge issue, actually, in information security for ages.
Right. Where,
hackers, be them, legit white hat hackers or bad black hat hackers, they'll find exploits in programs. It's not an unknown circumstance where a hacker will find this exploit, bring it to that developer, and then get sued by the developer for finding this exploit, even though they never actually did anything with the exploit.
Right.
So, I mean, yes, it's in the video game world, but it's not exactly a new phenomenon of, how to, properly or ethically handle exploits. Obviously, there's a world of difference between, finding an exploit and, say, an SSL certificate issue versus an exploit in Assassin's Creed. Obviously, two huge differences in what you're finding an exploit in.
Right.
But
okay, so if you were in the position of being a publisher or a developer, would you be going all like batshit crazy when people are going, "Hey, look at the craziness I found. This makes the game so much easier"?
No, but I can also see why they're doing it. You got the people sitting in their ivory tower.
Yeah.
These executives, penny pinchers, and these marketing people, and they see the world in a different way than you and I do. That's just the reality. It's an entirely different perception of life when you live in that ivory tower of being the big-time EA executive, or I guess Ubisoft in this case.
Right.
So they look at it very differently, I think, and then they just look at it like, "Oh, that's terrible and evil." That's how they look at it. It's just a completely different way of looking at the world than your typical gamer. So obviously, I'm going to be on the side of, yeah, show your exploits. Who cares? But I can also understand why I actually don't quite get it, but the reality is I'm not going to get it because I don't look at the world like they do.
Well, here's another thing, and maybe this is just we're outside the box thinkers, but if let's say that we're playing a multiplayer game and someone has posted a video of an exploit in the game, then you would know to be on the lookout for that. If you know if you're playing in a game and all of a sudden, shit doesn't seem quite right, oh, okay, so what they did is they did that weird Halo thing where if you run off at a certain angle, you can actually throw yourself across the entire map.
You know what it is? Have you heard of the security through obscurity?
Mm.
That's basically what the publishers are wanting. Whereas they figure if they just plug their ears and close their eyes, nobody will know about these security loopholes. Well, they're not really security when it comes to video game, but nobody will know about these exploits if nobody posts about it because It's security through obscurity, basically, what these publishers are going through, which doesn't work.
Right. So, for me, I understand that you want your game to look perfect, but when people find that it's not perfect, here's your chance to step up to the plate and fix it.
Well, and they want the best of both worlds. They want people, talking about how great their game is, but then they also want to be like, oh no, you can't post the bad things. You can only post the good things.
Which leads us back to the Ubisoft review embargo that ended after the game was already on sale.
Which now I think everybody understands why there's a review embargo.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so obviously it's kind of like, oh, really? But, kind of looking back, say, yes, we've had a kind of streak, let's say, of not always stellar AAA titles released too early, whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So think about that, though. Do you think it's truly a case of AAA publishers releasing, basically shit, or is it just in this world of information flooding at such an instantaneous rate nowadays that these crappy loopholes and exploits and terrible things about video games are just becoming known exponentially faster than in the 90s, when basically you have to wait till you got your latest edition of 2600 Hacker to know about these exploits via the mail a month later after it already came out.
So we are so far into the instant information age, it's not even funny. So for someone, to stomp their feet and pout and say you've got to remove that video of that exploit, that's ridiculous because there's already like 1,000 of that type of information already out there. Yep. So you're trying to, you have a massive waterfall going and you're trying to stop a drop of water. That being said, I think the unfortunate thing is that the game industry is still very unstable when it comes to economic finances. Even the bigger names, they want to try to turn their profit as quickly as possible without taking on as much debt. Yep. So that, of course, they have these. I think their launch dates, unless you are like Blizzard, are etched in stone, and you have to release it no matter what. And I think that is a terrible thing.
But even with Blizzard, you still get a title like Diablo 3, which is still slammed on release by the vast majority.
True. But it was just a bad game. It wasn't flawed. It was just a bad game. I mean, it was flawed, but I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't like.
I don't think it was a bad game. It just didn't live up to the hype.
Well,
and it had the real money auction house, which
so this is what you run into when you're able to basically set your own release date. Is you allow the hype to grow, and then when you finally get out that product, it better be the next biggest game ever. And if it isn't, people are gonna look down on it. That's what Bungie has been fighting for with Destiny since its release. Yeah. A lot of people, it's not. I hate to say this, but I kind of equate it to sort of slightly global agenda-ish, where you have the basic game there, but there's nothing really there. I mean, you can kind of make it.
I know what you're saying now.
But okay, so all right, so AAA title people, developers, publishers. you're getting a free service to find all the loopholes so you can plug them and create a stronger product. You are in an age where technology can immediately be like given to someone in a heartbeat. It's not like we have to wait around for a freaking disc in your PC Gamer magazine for the patches, okay? So
Those are the days.
I understand it's going to cost more money, but in the long run, the more solid your product is, the more you're going to gain. You're going to further your fan base, and then when you bring out your next one, hopefully you will have learned from your previous lessons. Well, there's certain companies out there who will never learn, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move into something a little bit more indie developer-ish. An interesting debate has started up over quantity over quality.
Okay.
It's an interesting kind of situation. You want to get your name out there. So one of the quickest ways to do that is to, I don't want to say flood the market, but make sure that you have a lot of product out there that's constantly going out there so that people are like, oh, there's another game by these people. Now, of course, hopefully, you have an okay product. But then you have those individuals who put their blood, sweat, and tears. And so here's the deal. You could do quantity and hope that you get that new game smell that will drive people wild. And it didn't cost you that much because you were able to turn it out quick.
Yep.
And then you could go to your next project. Or do you bank on your project being solid and you put more time into it? So you're not going to release as many games in that time frame, but you're going to release something maybe larger, more polished, better looking. I mean, what if you were an independent developer?
Yes.
Would you go the quantity or quality road?
Honestly, I think initially, until I get my foot in the door, it seems like if I'm looking at it from an economic standpoint and trying to make it in the world, it would make more sense to go with the quantity over quality.
Right.
I think in the short term, I think it definitely makes more sense. It's kind of like we talked about with the App Store.
Mm-hmm.
Basically the App Store is a crap shot. Maybe your game makes it to the top, chances are it won't, but who knows?
Right.
And, there's 100,000 quality iOS games that nobody's ever heard of because there's so many damn games out there for it.
Right.
And so I think, if you're any developer, it probably makes more sense to do the quantity over quality from being a realistic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
At the same point, there are the games that come out which obviously are quality, but then we run into the issue that we talked about a couple of weeks ago with the episodic content, where if you're doing quality over quantity, you could get to the situation where it's taking so long between episodes or whatever product you're bringing out where people forget about you. So I definitely think there is that happy medium, but it's also probably different for every publisher, every game.
Right.
It's a hard one. But at the same time, it's, do you really want to set, as a developer, the bar low? You'd be like, well, we can make a game of 65% quality, but we can make it 130% faster. What do you think, man?
So, okay, I too, if I were an indie developer, I believe to get my foot out the door, I think that I would find a simple concept and then try to build on that as quickly as possible. Maybe different iterations, maybe slightly different things. There's an individual out there who's a Georgia game developer who kind of does that. Sequels, basically. Yeah. You can go that route. But my thing is that I'm afraid that if you go quantity for too long, you'll get caught in that ever-ending loop and never produce anything of quality that could actually raise the bar.
I think it's much easier to go from quality to quantity than it is to go from quantity to quality.
Absolutely.
Like if you're always producing mediocre work, it's hard to set that bar high once you've already been doing it for so long. Yeah. Whereas I could easily see if you're always producing quality work but not fast, it'll be easier to cut corners on the quality in the future and produce it maybe a little bit faster.
Right.
Or if you get to that point, maybe you produce still high quality work, but maybe a little bit faster too.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, in the app marketplace, I think that it is paramount, unless you have a name to at least someone that is a developer in your group, that basically has its own, I guess, groupies that follow that person.
Yep.
It would be, unless you find, fire, unless you find something amazing, something.
Flappy Birds.
Right.
You get lucky.
You get absolutely lucky. Or perhaps your project strikes the right chord with so many people that it starts, continues to exponentially get bigger. Now, of course, with that, you've got expectations. So you have to be careful about that. And the game that comes right to mind for me is Elysian Shadows. Those guys have blown up.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that the game, when it comes out, I'm not exactly sure when, but when it comes out, I hope that it actually blows us all away, and that is the start of something magical for that entire group. That's my hope. That being said, not everyone is going to be able to take that path. They were able to catch fire in the right way at the right time. They had just enough people to kind of talk it up. Then the bigger guys picked it up, and that's how you escalate. But when you are like let's say that Zealeus and I were to make an Ultra Confusion gaming studio.
Woo!
We might have some friends and family that are willing to talk us up, but it would take a revolutionary idea for us to really break into it. So then you'd have to go the quantity route.
Crystals of Prine's pretty revolutionary, I'm just saying.
If we ever complete it. If I would stop basically burning it down to the ground and then try to build it up again.
Like a phoenix, it shall rise from the ashes better than ever.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the castle in Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail.
Mm.
It's like, no one, they said you couldn't build a castle in the swamp. So we built a castle in the swamp. It sunk in the swamp. And so we built another castle in the swamp. It fell over and then sank in the swamp. And then we built a third one, and that burnt to the ground, fell over, and then fell into the swamp. But the fourth one is the strongest castle you'll ever have. Yes. So, indie developers out there.
No, which there's many.
New and old.
And medium.
Somewhere in between. Medium sound, that didn't sound right.
Medium age.
Medium age? Oh,
yeah.
Lord. You develop, if you're an older gentleman or female or whatever, and you want to make games, go ahead. Age is not an issue.
With video games and society, it's a beautiful thing that way.
Mm. But anyways, seriously, you do what you're passionate about. I saw this great article about a pretty big or a pretty well-known author who decided, you know what, F it. I am going to publish my first ever story. It is absolutely horrific. It's a terrible story, but I want to show people that you don't
start
spin
with
gold. Yeah, right from the beginning. You have to build up to it. And the more you do it, which is, okay, so this is the quantity part, but you can also factor in quality to it, is the more you do it, the better and more proficient you get at it, and the more you can pour into it to make it a better product. Now, if you go the route of, well, let's say, let's say that you basically have a clone of a Puzzle Quest, a match 3 type system. And all you do is you change out, one time it's gems, the next time it's teddy bears, the third time it's bottle caps. Okay, we know which one you're going for.
So it's like Madden.
I'm not touching Madden. Okay, so that's definitely quantity over quality. Yes, the bottle caps look phenomenal in comparison to the gems. That's not what I'm talking about.
Never played, so don't know.
You never played Puzzle Quest?
Nope.
Are you sure?
I don't think I ever played, honestly.
Huh.
I've never been big into the puzzle games.
You ever played Bejeweled?
Yes. It's like that.
It's like Bejeweled, but
Yeah.
it's got RPG elements. RPG elements are awesome!
They're in everything now.
Yes. All right. So, choose your own destiny when it comes to quantity over quality. If you are but I mean, because the answer is there is no answer. It's different. Everyone's going to take a different path. Everyone's going to be able to do if you put your mind to it, you will accomplish it. But you're going to have to walk your own path. Do not try. Okay. Don't be a douchebag and just make a bunch of clones of a game that was popular like 5 months ago and think that you're going to make it big, because you ain't. Unless you add an element that the original game didn't have, and that's what takes off. All right, on to the next topic, because Charlie is full of topics this evening.
Go, Charlie!
Woo!
None of which I knew until now, which is kind of fun, actually.
Yeah.
It's like a surprise.
Yeah.
It's Christmas early for some of us.
All right, so there have Zealeus and I have mentioned this, or perhaps I mentioned it, and Zealeus kind of added into it a while ago.
Yes,
We were talking about trends in the type of genre of games as of late, and a lot of games are going the roguelike route.
Sure.
Now, there are quite a few hardcore roguelike gamers out there who are starting to get really pissed off because they think that the term roguelike is being misused. So I ask you, Mr. Zealeus, what to you makes it a roguelike?
I don't really have much of it. Okay, when I think of a freaking rogue game, I think of like the old school 2D style, where basically your dungeon, like you have, your little pixel on the screen, and like you're a 4x4 pixel dude.
So
and
we're talking ASCII.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know I was getting a really bad brain fart of what the term is. Yes, I think of ASCII when I think of roguelike games.
Okay.
I mean, that's rogue to me. And roguelike, I mean, the term doesn't really mean much to me. I'm like, whatever. I guess it's, randomly assigned dungeons and you go out and kill shit. That's the extent. I mean, rogue to me is old school.
Okay.
Like ASCII. It's almost like sometimes you keep on trying to apply genres to games when maybe we need a different name for a genre, because maybe that name has lost its meaning over the years. Because the original roguelike, part of the reason it was that way was because of the graphical limitations of computers back in the 80s and 90s. You didn't have these 3D graphics. So it's kind of like, well, can we call Diablo 1 a freaking roguelike game? Because A, it's a dungeon, and 2, you get loot, and 3, they're randomly generated dungeons. So does that make the original Diablo roguelike? It just happens to be in 3D. So to me, that's in a way where roguelike is kind of like, eh. So to me, roguelike is ASCII.
Okay. And I can totally understand that. And to be honest, I think that term roguelike has been so overused, and to the point where perhaps the original definition.
It's kind of like It's kind of like so many games are called RPGs that are nothing like original RPGs.
Right.
It's like everything's an RPG now. Everything has RPG elements in it.
Right.
It's like if you have a stat, it's an RPG.
If you have a stat that can increase
or
decrease.
It's now an RPG. So it's some genres, maybe they get stretched a little bit thin, and maybe we need to have a different nomenclature. I don't know.
Okay, so for me...
But, sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
I think it's bloody stupid to get your, as my mom would say, your boxers in a bundle over what phrase is being used to describe a video game, and the video game is not really a roguelike. It's something else. Let me tell you what roguelike is really like. I'm like...
Okay, so here's my definition of roguelike.
Okay.
Of course, the original it has to be ASCII. To me, it's randomized dungeons that every single time you go into the dungeon, you're faced with a new dungeon. Okay, to me, roguelike. Okay, so this is the part. Okay, so all right, I'm going to try to describe this as best as I can, and I apologize if I butcher this. But okay, so it's a game in which there truly is the vast majority of the game is a rinse and repeat type of activity, where your meat and potatoes of the game is just trying to see how far you can get into the dungeon before you have to go back to town. And then, of course, I think so.
Okay. Based on Wikipedia, roguelike,
Right, let's do this.
roguelike is a subgenre of role-playing video games characterized by procedural level generation, which means they're all different, turn-based gameplay,
Oh, okay, okay.
tile-based graphics, and permanent death, and typically based on a high fantasy narrative setting. So I say most of those probably you get in most roguelikes nowadays. Roguelikes. Yeah. Permanent death is probably the one you don't see as much as you did back in the day.
No. So I think the element that has been replaced in the term roguelike is definitely the permadeath.
Yes.
I think now when you're faced with what they consider a roguelike game, basically instead of permadeath, what they do is you are able to gain from your previous experiences. Now, certain games will allow you to, if you die, you basically just get resurrected from the town. What you have equipped is what you have, and then, of course, you lost all your inventory.
Mm-hmm.
There are other times where all the currency that you have collected you get to retain, so you can upgrade your character so that perhaps you can go further in the game, which is one of the things about Rogue Legacy, which is a PC game. It is real time. It's not turn based, and it's not. It is a side scroller.
Okay.
But basically, the way that they get around it, it's kind of permadeath. What it is every single time you come back to life, you are the offspring of the person who died.
Nice.
And to make things interesting, you randomly have you can have conditions added to you, because you can have dwarfism, which means that you're actually much smaller on the screen. You can have giantism, which means you're humongous. You can have flatulence, which means that every single time you jump, you hear this sound.
Excellent.
Which is kind of humorous, but it gets old. But everything, all the armor. Here's the weird thing. This is what that doesn't click for me. Is that all your weapons and your armor, after you die, somehow your heir apparent gets it, and then they go back in there.
Nice.
That to me does not compute. So yes, permadeath. Yeah, it's kind of like it's like really old school, like we'll go back to Nintendo. I know that Super Mario is not a roguelike game, but it's the same principle of you go as far as you can, and once you're dead, you absolutely 100% are starting from scratch from the beginning.
Or no, you have hardcore modes in the Diablos.
Yeah.
I mean, you got hardcore mode in Diablo, or if you die, that character is basically deleted.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows up like red on your character screen. So, in a way, Diablo is actually kind of a roguelike in that regard, if you want it to be, with the permanent death part. The dungeons can be procedurally created.
Yeah.
Granted, it's not, old school ASCII type graphics, obviously.
Well, so the original Diablo, it did have randomized dungeons,
yes,
except for the boss levels. Those were almost 100% the same.
Well, yes and no. Because what would happen is
Hit the mouse.
So the actual boss dungeon was always like really small, but like that last level, like 4-2, was still the randomly created dungeon. So, and I remember this because you used to do a bunch of we call them like Laz runs to get to Lazarus. So, I can't remember this like 20 years later. But basically get to him, and you'd have to like do all this jumping around to get to that boss because nobody knew where the actual like portal to the boss was.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd be jumping around to find these portals. So that part was always randomized. But then yes, once you got to the actual last boss, then that like little itty bitty spot that was static.
Right. I just remember as soon as you were on the butcher level, you knew that you were on the butcher level.
Oh, the butcher, he was a classic. And then you go to the cow level.
Yeah. See, okay, so just a side note here. Now that we're thinking about the good old games from old,
GOG.
Um,
Which, by the way, has
a huge ass sale going on.
Something of Wonder, the 4x4 game.
Age of Wonder.
Age of Wonder is free on Good Old Games right now.
So go get it! What are you waiting for?
It's a great game. It really is a great game.
Yeah.
Like, oh, seriously, it is a fun game. I would highly recommend
I
it.
think I've got number 2.
I think I have like 4 copies of it somehow over the years.
It came free with your graphics card.
Probably. Who knows?
Yeah, I've got 2 copies of Thief because of that.
Nice.
Which, by the way, I suck at Thief. Here's a little.
Because you can't go, die everybody!
Exactly. Here's a little known fact about Charlie. Do not let me play stealth games.
Charlie's not a
because
thief.
I will put a controller, a keyboard, or a mouse through a wall. Because I am not quiet. I can't. Once I see an enemy, I gotta kill him.
Must kill, must destroy.
I'm like, oh yeah, I can sneak around. That's why the game. Oh man, what was that 360 game that I played?
Dishonored.
Yes, Dishonored. There's 2 ways to play Dishonored: the sneaky way and the dirty way. The dirty way, and I say that literally and figuratively. The dirty way, of course, is you kill anyone you come up against. Now, the cool mechanism in Dishonored was that the more you kill people, the dirtier the city became. So if you didn't kill people, which of course would then spread the disease, which is why it became dirtier. If you didn't kill them, everything was nice and clean.
So it's killing people that actually spread the disease?
Yes.
That's depressing.
I'm sorry. Spoiler. Is there really a limitation? I mean, come on.
The statute of limitations.
I think it's up on Dishonored.
Yeah, I would agree. So did you ever play Deus Ex?
I played the one on the 360.
Because that has stealth elements too, if you so choose. I know you don't have to.
What was the Deus Ex game I played? The latest one.
I never played them, but I know that has stealth.
It was not a good game.
But I know.
Yes, it does. It did have stealth in it, but the storyline just fell flat for me. And for me, I need something to really sink my teeth into so I can kind of justify playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
But if you kind of... This is one of the biggest issues with a lot of the RPGs is to make a game feel like a real RPG, you've got to hit this hour threshold, which is bullshit.
The what?
This certain amount of hour threshold.
40 hours.
Right. Which is total bullshit. If you've got a good story that allows you to level up and it kind of takes off, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I don't have to hit this magical, it's got to be over 40 hours, so you've got to grind for 30 of the 40 hours.
Well, then you get into the Final Fantasy 13
I don't want to talk
syndrome.
about 32-hour tutorial.
Exactly.
Anyways, I was having a conversation. Okay, real quick. I picked up a game for my 3DS because Jesse finally gave me back my 3DS.
What?
I know. It's called Fantasy Life. It's literally about as MMO-ish as you can get.
Okay.
So you start off as a character who has no profession.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to choose whatever profession you want to choose. Of course, I choose the hunter. I'm always with a bow, my friend. I'm always with a bow. So you level up that. So that's my profession. I level it up. I unlock special attacks, all that stuff, and I go exploring whatever. Now, of course, there's a miner, fisherman, paladin, carpenter, woodcutter, all this other stuff. At any time, you can go back to the guild hall and you can get your license to change to a different a profession.
Okay.
And so what happens is you can only level up and turn in your profession quest for the profession that is currently selected.
Okay.
But that being said, you can still finish you can still take on quests from, like, right now, I leveled up my hunter to a certain point. Then I switched over to miner, so that I could collect ore. So I can't turn in any of my hunter quests, but that doesn't mean that I don't get credit. I still get credit for all the quests. I just can't turn them in until I'm hunter is turned back on. It is a very interesting game. It is a huge time sink because you play and you see. I'm a collector. Okay, when I play games, if there's shit on the ground, I've got to pick it up, which is why I'm terrible with inventory management. You give me a game where you have limited inventory, and I'm screwed because I don't know what I may need in the future.
Exactly.
I'm a pack rat,
and you'll never use 98% of it anyway.
Absolutely. It's like I've got all these fluffy flowers right now. I probably will never use them, but you know what? There's going to be someone out there who needs 50 fluffy flowers.
It's to make a fluffy bed.
Yeah. Well, it's actually, someone said, "Oh, you're going to give fluffy flowers to fluff your pillow?" I'm like, no.
Oh.
Anyways, so Fantasy Life, awesome.
Sounds like a cool game.
It is. I actually really like it. I've put already 8 hours into it.
80 hours is quite
8, not 80. Good lord. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we breached the yep, we are definitely over the 30-minute mark.
Oh yeah.
So this is what we're going to do. We are going to end the recording. We're going to stay live for just a little bit longer. But Zealeus, if you'll hand me that mouse right there.
Yes, Overlord.
Thank you, sir. All right, so let's do our sign-off real quick. So thank you for tuning in to the Alter Confusion Thursday Night Hangout. For myself, Charlie, and Zealeus, it's been a pleasure to give you this amazing information and actually talk topics instead of shooting the shit the entire time, which was productive.
Always.
Indeed. But tune in next week where I'm sure that we'll have more amazing topics now that we've got this party started. And tell your friends.
Remember, kids, keep on gaming in the free world.
Amen to that, brother.